We were offered this space by Langwith Parish Council, and we decided to take it up because we couldn't stay in the old building for much longer, and the opportunity just came at the right time. Everything in here is about Langwith. It's about people, it's about places. So we've got things on the munitions factory that was very important in World War I. We've got cotton mill, which was quite controversial in its day because it employed children. And we've got things on a story of the maltings, which was also a big industry around this area.
And it's quite unusual, Anne, to find something of this sort of magnitude in such a small area. Why is it so important that you preserve this type of heritage and history?
If it was scrapped, nobody'd know about how it was in Langwith when I was a child. I mean, I'm 77. But what we did when we were kids was hopscotch, spinning tops, things like that. And the younger generation today don't know anything about that. So if we have children in, which we do, with the parents, then we talk to them about it. And Kath's very good with the kids, showing them and explaining all the artefacts that we've got left.
Because, you know, everything now you can do in the palm of your hand, whereas we've got a huge typewriter in there that they wouldn't recognise. We've got some old toys in there that they may or may not still play with, replicas of them, but, you know, we've got some originals. So it's interesting to say now, what do you think that was used for? You know, like a moustache cup. You know, all kinds of things like that.
Anne, you're the resident sort of historian, if you like, a family tree and things like that.
Yeah.
Can you just explain the process of how somebody would go about sort of researching the family history?
We've got a special form that I ask them to fill in with their name and phone number, because obviously I need contact. And then if they know anything about the grandparents, or start with the parents and then go to the grandparents, and as much information and dates of birth that they can go back to, and say they only go back to the grandparents. You know, you ask questions like, what was your grandparents' father or mother's name, do you know? And 90% of the time they don't.
What work did they do?
So I have to go through the censuses, I go through other paperwork that's online to find them, and I can route them out by tying in addresses, date of births, or, you know, christenings and things like that. A lot of the parish records tend to be up and down with incorrect information on, but I get there in the end.
And have you had any sort of unusual things crop up while you've been doing
Murder?
Oh,
right.
yes.
Yeah.
So it was somebody who's actually a murderer, or somebody's been murdered?
It was a murder with a child where he worked in Sheffield, and he used to keep the knife that he used out of his pocket on the bedside. Well, you know, families in them days, if he worked nights, so in the daytime, in the night time, the children were sleeping in that bed, and then he'd get up, they'd get up, and he'd go to bed for the day. Yeah. And that child went in the bedroom, and he was asleep. He went to take it off him, and he caught him and severed his throat. But it was murder, and I couldn't believe it when I saw it. And when I told the people, they went, "Oh, you know."
This is our very compact art gallery. We've got sketches that different people have done, but mainly we've got paintings by John Hyatt, who was one of the founders of the Heritage Association many years ago. We've got photographs from Whaley Common Village Hall that is not in existence anymore. We've got paintings by Les Salt and Arthur Trolley, who were local people, and we've got framed photographs and pictures that people have just brought into us and said, you know, would you like this? So obviously we say yes, and we try and find somewhere to put them. These are the farming implements that Tony Warriner donated to the Heritage Association. And this long piece of metal here is quite significant because it's the needle that went into the haystacks. So when the bales were all piled on top of each other, the needle went in the middle. The following day, the farmer must come along, pull it out to see if it's still warm. If it is, they had to realign the haystack, rebuild it. But if he couldn't find a needle, this is where the saying, you can't find a needle in a haystack, because then he was classed as a bad farmer because he'd lost his needle. So, you know, we're lucky to have something like that, really, because it's a story you can tell children and adults. We've got very few cabinets now with artefacts in, but the smaller stuff was easier to move, obviously, and to keep. So we've got information about the old Methodist chapel that's no longer with us. We've got bits about the old co-op that used to take up Old Main Street. We've got a lot of social history, artefacts that we can show to children, like, say, a moustache cup that they wouldn't understand what that was about. We've got some toys, we've got a very old typewriter, and then on this side we've got a lot of mining, little bits and pieces, and other wartime things that, you know, are still of interest to people. And behind me is the story of the munitions factory that was built secretly at the beginning of World War I to make the chemical that went into the sea mines. It was produced up here and then shipped out to somewhere else to be put into the mines, which protected places like Scapa Flow up at northern Scotland there. And then it was so secret they pulled it back down again. It was only there for about 5 years, but there were explosions and there were people who lost their lives. So it's a very interesting story.
And what would you say to somebody who's never been sort of to the centre? What would you say to them to encourage them to come along and have a look round and have a chat with you?
Well, if they're interested in family history, obviously I can talk for England about family history because I love it. It's addictive, and once you get somebody on board, they the same. They want to know about the parents, the grandparents, and even for the other side, the paternal side of the family as well. You know, and it's so interesting what they did for work, how they moved about. You can't believe that they moved about as much as they did because the transport wasn't like it is today.
We do get local people in, but we also get people who've lived away and they've come back on holiday and they want to show the friends and the kids, you know, this is the stuff that I had when I was a child. This is where I lived, and this is my